Hello, beautiful people, and welcome, to your somewhat irregularly scheduled dose of Favonius weapon propaganda. It's Ask Zajef Yelan time. Yelan is getting her rerun. I talked about her a decent amount in the banner review video, but one thing I want to mention, or like reiterate, I guess, for people who haven't watched it, is that her importance in the meta has fluctuated a lot over the years. But for now, we're gonna start with the usual Ask Zajef stuff, which is place in the meta, pull value, and how much that's changed since her last rerun. Yelan is a character that is not bad in the meta, but is also not dominant at all. She's a fairly forgettable and fairly replaceable character that is one of the competitive options for many teams. In terms of pull value, in my opinion, it's very low, because as the game gets more and more focused on cohesive archetypes, with all the units being on the team, or most of the units on the team being specialized supports that are just way more powerful than the generic ones, it's becoming harder and harder for me to recommend going for the more general supports. And unfortunately, Yelan falls in that category. The landscape of the meta in her last rerun was dominated by Nevidet. We had Arlecchino, we had Clorand, Gaming, Lenny, normal hyperbloom stuff, Mono Hydro, straight up, was okay. Xiangling was still very present. And then Natlan started, and it kind of raised the baseline expectation for carries to a point where they weren't just Xiangling side grades anymore. And the specific carries that were added, Mualani, Kanich, Chaska, Mavuika, Furina, do not want Yelan. Mualani can use Yelan in some of her teams. It's like usable, but it's only one of the options, and it's generally not the best one. Kanich just doesn't want to use her at all. Chaska can't proc her burst, so she doesn't want to use her at all. Mavuika can use her, but it's generally way worse than using the cryo units. Furina just straight up can't use her. Then with Skirk, we got another character that could use her. She's not important to Skirk teams. She's like a side grade to the alternatives. Inefa teams don't really care about her that much. She's usable, but she's not great. And there's just so many things that are better than the teams Yelan could do that don't want to use Yelan. This patch, Llama came out, and it kind of helped her a little bit. Double Hydro Hyperbloom with Llama is fairly solid, but if you're gonna be going for a 5-star with Llama, Yelan won't be your best option. Especially with Nefer coming out next patch, and Nefer teams looking better than Double Hydro Hyperbloom. Going for Yelan for a Hyperbloom team in 2025, going on 2026, just isn't a good idea meta-wise. Does that mean that Yelan is bad? No. Yelan is one of those characters that like are still played pretty often nowadays. She is at the very least strong enough that it doesn't feel like putting her on your team is a handicap, but she is not strong enough to justify the Primogens from a pure meta perspective for this current rerun. Obviously, just the meta perspective is very rarely the only factor that matters for people, so we're gonna have a lot more to talk about. But just for people that are like a bit less informed about the meta, maybe they're newer to the game or whatever, you'll probably hear a lot of people talking about how good Yelan is, because especially in like more casual sections of the community, Yelan is very, very well perceived. And I just want to convey that I don't think she's bad, but she is definitely not a unit that is worth going for right now, meta-wise. But honestly, that's pretty much it for the generic section where we talk about her current power. And so let's get on to the questions from you guys. How valuable are her constellations, especially the C1? The reality is that nowadays, Yelan's cons just ain't it. Like, C6 aside, there's not that many teams where Yelan is like a large majority of the team DPS for her strong teams right now. Her C1 helps her ER requirements, but helping ER requirements doesn't actually help you burst more often. It just lets you build more damage. I guess that matters a bit more for Siege and Onslaught. Just starting with 2 E's when you're not starting with burst matters, but it's not that big of a deal. C2 is more apt, but honestly, gone are the days when that was a massive deal. The characters that care about this additional application are generally Hu Tao and Hyperbloom, but because Llama's app is a bit slower than Nahida's, you don't actually need this to basically use up all your Dendro and Hyperbloom teams anymore. And because Hu Tao is Hu Tao, and it's almost October 2025, that doesn't matter that much anymore either. It is also additional damage, but like I said earlier, that it's just not enough to be that impactful. Does that mean that C2 Yelan is a unit that's like just bad? No. It'll compare pretty favorably to a lot of C0 characters, but compared to other C2 characters, it's dog shit. Her C4 is an HP buff, but like, it's so fake. Like, it says 40, but the 40's fake. It's 20% in single target, but like, that's less than a resonance worth of stats. That's so small. C4s in general tend to suck, so it's not like she's particularly... It's not like she's an outlier with a shitty C4, but yeah, it's not a very good one. Especially because the only teams that actually care about HP are Hu Tao, and you've already heard what I had to say about Hu Tao. Like, Nividet, but you don't want to be using this shit in Nividet. It's just not good. And then her C6. Honestly, it's kind of weird because I'd say that at this point, C6 Yelan is probably not even better than the best C0 carries. C6 Yelan, back when it was released, was very powerful, but the power creep that happened in Natlan was like so steep that at this point, I'd say that C6 Yelan is slightly better than Mavuika, just DPS-wise. But it's like, basically, in a tier list, it'll be in the same tier as C0 Mavuika. If you are a whale and you want to use Yelan, and the reason why you want to use Yelan is just because you want to have her on your team, not because you want her to be doing the damage, you're generally better off leaving her at C0 and pulling for cons on carries instead, and playing her as a support. Maybe you can think about the C1 so she's more comfortable to play, but I'd say that like current year whales should not go for Yelan cons unless they're just a massive Yelan simp, at least not past C1. Isn't she the first character who'll be shown the door in a hyperbloom team? Not necessarily, but maybe. Current double hydro hyperbloom teams look like this, with Llama, Electro Trigger, Sainto Yelan. There's also the Nibinet version, but that's a different team at that point. You have 3 options for the Electro slot. You can use Raiden, you can use Kuki, or you can use Inefa. You don't have like side grade replacements for Yelan. Well, you have a lot of like slight downgrade replacements, with pretty much all the Dendro units are official. Sainto is mainly there because of his insane amount of Hydro application, and I don't think Sainto would really get replaced. And so in the like double Hydro Hyperbloom core, I think that both Raiden and Yelan are a little shaky. Right? Like both your Electro slot and your Yelan slot are a bit shaky. And whoever gets replaced first just depends on what kind of unit they release first. Do they release another Hydro that works well here, or do they release a dedicated Hyperbloom trigger? But I think like 3 years from now, Yelan and Raiden will both have been replaced in the double Hydro Hyperbloom teams. Will Sainto be replaced? No, that's my goat. The only way to replace Sainto in these Hyperbloom teams is to make it so that your carries have strict rotations, or that your characters have strict rotations that are shorter than 20 seconds, because then it feels bad to use Sainto. But if you do that, then that means that it's not really this type of team anymore, right? Like the Nevinet Furina Raiden Llama team, I think most people would agree, isn't really just the same type of double Hydro Hyperbloom that this shit is, right? Like, at that point, that's not a Hyperbloom team, that's a Nivinet team, if that makes sense. Like, it's still technically a Hyperbloom team, but it feels like it's defined more by being a Nivinet team than a Hyperbloom team. And I think if they release Hyperbloom-focused units that would phase out Sainto, it would be the same. Sure, they wouldn't use Sainto, but you probably wouldn't think about them as Hyperbloom teams. Who is her best substitute in Hyperbloom? Honestly, there is very little difference between all the substitutes. You can use pretty much any of the Dendros. You can use Fischl, or you can use a generic support like Zhongli. You can use Sucrose just for the EM buff, even if you're not really gonna reliably get swirls. Like, I'd say Yelan is better than the alternatives, but between the alternatives, there's not much difference. Yelan or Furina? I'd say between the two, I would definitely lean towards Furina. But yeah, skip both, get Columbina. Chat gets it. For someone who doesn't own many off-field Hydro units, would you recommend getting Yelan? No. If you need multiple Hydro characters to enable your shield teams, like you need Hydros for Blooms against the Crab and for Electrocharge against the loser, I understand wanting to get Yelan for that, but the reality is that she's not enough of an upgrade over the alternatives to really justify it, and you're probably better off just taking the L, putting Aino on the team, and saving your Primos for someone else. Is she important for Hu Tao? No, she's not. Hu Tao's strongest offensive teams right now are Furina, second Hydro healer, with the best healer options being Shilonen and Xianyuan. Now, for the second Hydro, Yelan is the best option. Sainto's not that much worse, but also, if I'm being fully honest with you guys, I kind of expect Columbina to beat out both of them. But with Hu Tao being added to the constellation selector that they introduced this patch, for this thing, there's gonna be more people that have C1 Hu Tao, so the Xianyun variations will be a bit worse. Can she compensate for a lack of a Hydro main DPS in case of Hydro checks and Abyss? Yes and no. Is she gonna be, like, able to? Sure. But she's gonna be worse than getting an actual hydro carry, and it's not like she's cheaper than hydro carries. So personally, I wouldn't recommend doing that. What Mavuika combos if I want to cope with Mavuika Yelan? You just do the normal vape combos. There's some, like, cringe-ass bullshit you can do with, like, hyper-optimized, vape-perfect vape combos. But as a general rule, you've got two main vape combos. So the C2D and the CDN1. C2D is just spin twice, dash, repeat, right? That's the most basic combo that most people tend to use. In vape teams that have enough Hydro App, which includes Yelan teams, instead of doing C2D, so 2 spins dash, you can do 1 spin dash normal attack. You have to do it in that order because you can't do spin then normal attack. It just doesn't let you. When you stop spinning, it does the final hit. It doesn't do a normal attack. And you can't do normal attack spin charge because then it was gonna vape as your normal attack instead of your charge. But yeah, so you CDN1, CDN1. Oops, I did N2 by accident. And this is slightly better because it gets 6 charge attacks during the burst formation instead of 5. But it's a lot harder to do and it's not that big of a DPS gain. So generally, it's not really worth doing. Yeah, and then things can go wrong. Like they did there, where you lose your application. I don't like playing Melt Arlecchino. Is Yelan still the best Hydro for Arlecchino vape? Most people that actually play Yelan and Arlecchino teams don't do the charge attack combos that are actually optimal. But yeah, just in terms of what she provides to the team, Yelan is like somewhere between 5 and 10% ahead of Candace C6 in Arlecchino vape teams, and like Candace isn't that good, so it's not a great sign for her. She's one of the things you can do, but it's pretty underwhelming. Is EQ or QE with more N1s usually better? It depends. As a general rule, EQ is better for energy, but you just straight up get less hits if you EQ than if you QE. If you're on a team that wants to spend, or where Yelan damage is significant, generally QE, otherwise generally EQ. But then sometimes there's specific setups that want a specific order. Is her stick worth it? Not just for herself, but also as a stat stick? No. Aqua Simulacra was a pretty good stat stick when it came out, but the reality is that weapon power creep is very much a thing. Signature weapons get better and better for their signature characters, but they're not the only weapons that are getting power crept. Free-to-play weapons are getting power crept too. We're getting better and better damage-focused craftable and event weapons. And at this point, Aqua is a stat stick. I mean, it is better than other bows, but it's not even by that much. If you're going to be pulling for a 5-star weapon, it should be a signature for a character you play, not a generic stat stick. Now, how good of a signature is it for Yelan? It's not great. It's good if you play Yelan as a like pseudo carry, or like if you're getting cons on her or some shit. But in general gameplay, it's worse than Fav. And especially now with the only teams that really want to slot her in being reaction teams, it's also worse than Elegy. Is she decent with Mualani? She works with Mualani, but you need fast pyro or you need to play a burn vape team, right? So you can't do Mavuika with Yelan unless you're also using Dendro. But like, so she's not worth going for because she's just straight up kind of like same shit as Candace, basically. How will Yelan age with new characters? So far, Nodcry characters do not like damage percent. Inefa, Llama, Flynn's, and Nefer's leaked kit. All 4 of those characters, lunar reactions, which are the main focus of their kit. Well, Llama, it's not the main focus of her kit, but it's hyperblooms, which this also applies to. They don't benefit from damage percent in a significant way. If that trend continues, the Yelan will just keep getting worse with Nodcry because she's not going to be used with any of the new carries. Hoyo is trying to diversify a Hydro and make it so that there's less teams that want to use Furina, and Yelan is catching strays because of that. And honestly, her shorter rotations compared to Singto don't even matter that much anymore because the damage is getting further concentrated into only 1 or 2 units, like only Nefer or Inefa Flynn's, to the point where Yelan's personal damage doesn't matter that much. And if that's the case, then Singto in the slot can still work because his application from his skill is enough. So you can just use burst 1 rotation and skill the next, and then he doesn't increase your rotation length anymore. And Yelan does, both because 18-second cooldown for Flynn's 16-second rotations, and because of like movie length burst animation for Nefer's animation length rotational requirements. And so Singso's basically just a side grade to Yelan in both teams. Actually, I think he's an upgrade in Nefer teams. And that's just offensively without looking at the defensive utility he provides. Does Yelan value get higher if she gets added to the free constellation list? Honestly, no. I don't think her C1 really matters other than for quality of life. So I don't think it would change any of my thoughts on her. I have Aqua. How do I determine if Aqua or Fav is better on a team? Basically, is she solo Hydro or not? If she's solo Hydro, Fav is almost always better. If she isn't, Aqua is almost always better. It's a question of ER requirements, and generally in solo Hydro teams, her ER requirements are a lot higher. I think that's gonna be it for the Ask Zajef Yelan edition. As much as we've been pretty negative about Yelan in this video, do keep in mind the only content in the game that actually requires good meta teams rewards you with 100,000 Mora and 1 artifact reroll that's gonna make your best circlet get 80 flat defense per patch. So really, you're not missing out on much. If you like her despite her issues, do what you want and pull for who you like, but don't spend money on this shit game. Especially not if you're under the impression that you need to get Yelan for a good account, which is I would say it was never really true because I don't think there's any specific character you absolutely need. But even if you stretch that need to like really want or whatever, Yelan is not one of the most favorable 5 stars anymore. So keep that in mind. Hope you learned a thing or two. And as usual, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, YouTube.